The charity event was called the Hargrove Invitational. It was held every single year inside the estate of billionaire Richard Hargrove III. A mansion that sat on 14 acres of land most people in Bridgeport would never even walk past. Inside the ballroom that night, crystal chandeliers hung over 120 of the city's most powerful people. Business owners, politicians, celebrities, judges, investors, people who signed checks that changed lives, people who fired people for a living. And then there was Wesley, 18 years old, 6 feet 1 inch, thin frame, quiet eyes, standing near the service doorway in a white button-up shirt that fit him okay but wasn't tailored. Black slacks, no watch, no cufflinks, no status. He was holding a silver tray of empty champagne flutes because his mother was the head housekeeper for the Hargrove estate, and tonight she needed help because 27 staff members still wasn't enough to manage the ego of a man who introduced himself to strangers as Richard Hargrove III. The crowd was laughing at something. Wesley couldn't hear what. He wasn't listening. Until he heard the word chess. Richard Hargrove stood near the center of the ballroom beside an exhibition chessboard that he had commissioned from an Italian artisan for just over $200,000. The pieces were carved from ivory and black walnut. The board itself was mother of pearl and ebony. It sat on a custom mahogany table with gold trim. Hargrove had just finished beating the CEO of a commercial real estate firm named David Stein. Stein had played poorly on purpose. Everyone knew it. Hargrove did not know it. Or maybe he did, and didn't care. Winning felt good regardless of whether the other person let you win. Hargrove was flushed. He had been drinking champagne since 7 o'clock, and it was now almost 9. His bow tie was slightly crooked. His smile was slightly cruel. He turned to the room and raised his voice just enough to pull attention away from the string quartet in the corner. "That's 3 wins in a row tonight," Hargrove announced. "And I'll tell you what, I'm feeling generous. I will bet $1 million of my own money to anyone in this room who can beat me. Right now. 1 game, 1 million cash." The crowd laughed. Polite laughter. Nervous laughter. The kind of laughter people make when a powerful person says something that isn't really a joke, but they're supposed to treat it like one. David Stein clapped Hargrove on the shoulder. "Richard, you're a machine. I didn't stand a chance." Hargrove grinned. "That's because you play like you run your business, David. Scared to lose." More laughter. Stein's face tightened for less than a second. Then he smiled again. Because that's what you do when the man who controls half the commercial real estate loans in the county insults you in public. You smile. Hargrove looked around the room. "Come on. $1 million. Tax-free. I'll write the check tonight. Is there not a single person in this room brave enough to sit across from me?" Silence. Not because nobody could beat him. Hargrove was an amateur player at best. His rating was somewhere around 1,400 if he was being honest with himself, which he never was. But nobody in that room was going to embarrass the host. Nobody was going to take $1 million from a billionaire in front of his friends. That's not how power works. You don't bite the hand that funds your next project. Hargrove laughed. "I thought so. All these suits, all these titles. Nobody wants to play." That's when Wesley stepped forward. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He didn't raise his hand like a student in a classroom. He simply set down the silver tray of champagne flutes on a nearby service cart, wiped his palms on his slacks, and walked into the center of the ballroom. Past the politicians, past the celebrities, past the crystal and the gold and the $200,000 chessboard. He stopped 6 feet from Richard Hargrove III and said, "I'll play." The room went quiet. Not normal quiet. The kind of quiet where people look at each other to make sure they're seeing the same thing. A young black man in a service uniform standing in front of a billionaire at his own charity event, asking to play chess for $1 million. Hargrove blinked. Then he laughed. A loud, sharp, performative laugh designed to remind everyone in the room that he was still in charge. "I'm sorry," Hargrove said. "Who are you?" Wesley didn't answer immediately. He looked at the board, at the pieces, at the way the light caught the mother-of-pearl squares. Then he looked back at Hargrove. "My name is Wesley Carter. My mother is your housekeeper." The room got quieter. Hargrove's smile didn't disappear, but it changed. It became something sharper, something meaner. He tilted his head like he was examining a bug he found in his soup. "Lorraine's son," Hargrove said slowly. "The one who's always in the kitchen doing homework when I come down for coffee?" "Yes, sir." Hargrove looked around the room at his guests, raised his eyebrows, invited them to share in the joke. "Well, Wesley, I appreciate the ambition. I really do. But this isn't checkers. This is chess. Do you even know how the pieces move?" Wesley said nothing. Hargrove continued. "I've been playing for 30 years. I've studied with grandmasters. I have a private collection of vintage Soviet-era chess books worth more than your mother makes in 5 years." A few people laughed. Most didn't. Most were watching Wesley's face, waiting for him to crack, to shrink, to apologize and walk back to the service cart. He didn't. He stood there with his hands at his sides, calm, quiet, waiting. Hargrove didn't like that. He was used to people shrinking. He was used to his presence doing the work for him. But this kid wasn't giving him anything. No fear, no nervous smile, no quick retreat. So Hargrove decided to make it worse. "All right," Hargrove said, clapping his hands together. "All right, I love this. I love the confidence. Let's make a deal." He stepped closer to Wesley, close enough that Wesley could smell the champagne on his breath. "I'll play you," Hargrove said. "One game. If you win, I write you a check for $1 million right here in front of everyone. But if I win—" He paused. Let the silence stretch. The crowd was uncomfortable now. You could feel it. The way people shifted their weight, the way they looked at their shoes. "If I win," Hargrove continued, "your mother gets on her knees right here in this ballroom and polishes every single one of these ivory chess pieces by hand, with a cloth, while everyone watches." The room froze. Someone gasped. A woman near the back. You couldn't tell who, but the sound cut through the air like a small animal stepping on a branch in a quiet forest. Wesley's jaw tightened, just barely. His mother had worked for Richard Hargrove for 11 years. She had cleaned his toilets, scrubbed his floors, polished his silver, made his beds. She had never missed a day of work. She had never complained. She had never asked for anything. And this man wanted her on her knees in front of 100 wealthy strangers. Wesley looked at the board. Then he looked at Hargrove. "Add one more condition," Wesley said. Hargrove raised his eyebrows, surprised, amused. "Go ahead." "When I win," Wesley said, "you write the check to my mother, not to me, to Lorraine Carter." The room was dead silent now. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. Someone had clearly signaled to them from the side of the room, or maybe they just felt the shift in the atmosphere. The way you feel a storm coming before you see the lightning. Hargrove stared at Wesley for a long moment. Then he threw his head back and laughed. Loud, long, fake. "Deal," he said. He extended his hand. Wesley shook it. And that's when the audience at home needs to understand something. That's when you need to understand that Wesley Carter had not lost a single game of chess in 4 years. 147 games, tournament games, online games against masters, blitz games, classical games, games played in cold church basements and hot community centers and silent public libraries after school. He hadn't lost, not once. But Richard Hargrove didn't know that. Nobody in that ballroom knew that. Because for 4 years, Wesley had played under a pseudonym. 2 letters. WC. No photo, no profile, no interviews. Just a rating that kept climbing, and climbing, and climbing. 2,000, 2,100, 2,200. National master level. Top 1% of all chess players in America. And he had kept it a secret because his mother worked for people like Richard Hargrove. People who wouldn't understand. People who would feel threatened. People who might fire her just to prove a point. So Wesley stayed quiet. He played in the dark. He won in silence. He printed out puzzles at the public library and solved them on the bus. He carried a magnetic travel chess set in his backpack, the one with the missing black queen that he replaced with a small metal bottle cap. He studied Grandmaster games on his phone during lunch period while other kids scrolled through social media. He was ready. He had been ready for 4 years. And now he was standing across from a man who had no idea what was about to happen. But before we go back to that ballroom, before we watch Wesley Carter destroy Richard Hargrove on his own $200,000 chessboard in front of his own powerful friends, you need to understand something else. You need to understand how they ended up on opposite sides of that table. Because the difference between Wesley's morning and Hargrove's morning tells you everything you need to know about who was really holding the power. Let's start with Wesley. His alarm went off at 5:15 a.m. Not a phone alarm. A real alarm clock. Battery-powered. Plastic. Cracked on one side from when he dropped it 3 years ago. He didn't replace it because he didn't have the $15, and his mother needed that $15 for laundry detergent and bus fare and the little bag of oranges she liked to buy on Fridays as a treat. The apartment was cold. It was always cold in the winter. The heating in their building was controlled by a landlord who lived 40 minutes away and never answered his phone. Wesley put on a hoodie over his t-shirt. Then another hoodie over that. Then he walked to the kitchenette. The kitchenette had 2 burners that worked. One that didn't. A sink that drained slowly. A refrigerator that hummed loud enough to hear in the bedroom. The cabinets were mostly empty. Instant coffee, oatmeal, peanut butter, a loaf of bread. Wesley boiled water in a dented pot and made himself oatmeal. He ate it standing up because there was only one chair at the small table, and his mother would need that chair when she woke up. Lorraine woke up at 4:45 a.m. every day, even Sundays, even when she was sick. She had been doing this for 11 years. She moved quietly in the dark because she didn't want to wake Wesley. She didn't know that Wesley was already awake, that Wesley had been awake since 4:30 listening to her breathe in the next room, making sure she was still there, still okay, still fighting. She made herself instant coffee in the same dented pot. She didn't eat breakfast. She said she wasn't hungry in the mornings. Wesley knew she was saving the food for him. At 5:30, Lorraine put on her uniform. Gray pants, white shirt, blue vest, the Hargrove estate crest on the left breast pocket. She checked herself in the small mirror by the door, tucked her hair back, took a deep breath. Wesley watched her from the kitchenette. He wanted to say something. He always wanted to say something. But what do you say to a woman who cleans toilets for a man who would never remember her name if he passed her on the street? So he just said, "Love you, Ma." She smiled, tired, warm, real. "Love you too, baby. Study hard today." Then she walked out the door and down 3 flights of stairs and caught the 5:47 bus to the Hargrove estate. Now let's look at Richard Hargrove III's morning. He woke up at 7:30 a.m. in a bedroom the size of Wesley's entire apartment. His sheets were Egyptian cotton. His mattress was handmade in Sweden. The temperature in the room was automatically regulated by a smart home system that learned his preferences. He didn't set an alarm. He didn't need one. He had an assistant who called him at 7:30 exactly and said, "Good morning, Mr. Hargrove," in a pleasant voice. He showered in a marble bathroom with heated floors. He spent 20 minutes in front of a closet the size of a small boutique, choosing a suit. He did not think about where his clothes came from. He did not think about who sewed them. He did not think about the workers in factories who made less in a year than he spent on a single watch. He walked downstairs to a kitchen that had never seen a dented pot. 2 full-time kitchen staff members prepared his breakfast. Fresh squeezed juice, single-origin coffee from a roaster in Copenhagen, eggs from chickens that had probably been massaged. He ate at a table that seated 12. He ate alone. After breakfast, he walked to his home office. Glass walls, a view of the backyard that went on forever. On his desk, a chessboard, not the $200,000 one. That was for guests. This one was more modest, only $12,000. French, Art Deco. He moved a few pieces around without really thinking about it. He liked the way the pieces felt in his hand. Heavy, expensive, important. He had a photo on his desk. Himself with Garry Kasparov at a charity event in 2012. Kasparov looked uncomfortable. Hargrove looked like he had just won something. He hadn't. He had paid $10,000 for the privilege of standing next to a genius and pretending they were peers. Hargrove opened his laptop, checked his portfolio, checked his emails, dictated responses to his assistant without typing a single word. He made 3 phone calls. In each call, he spoke louder than necessary. He used phrases like, "I need you to understand," and "Do you know who you're talking to?" and "I built this city with my bare hands." He had not built anything with his bare hands. He had inherited a construction company from his father, who inherited it from his father, who actually did build things with his bare hands. But 3 generations later, the memory of labor had been replaced by the memory of money. At 9:30, Hargrove walked through his house. He checked on things, the silver, the floors, the art on the walls. He found a smudge on a mirror in the guest bathroom and made a note to speak to the housekeeping staff about attention to detail. The housekeeping staff included Lorraine Carter, who had been scrubbing that same mirror for 11 years and had never once left a smudge. The smudge was from Hargrove's own guest, from Hargrove's own party the night before. But Hargrove didn't consider that, because Hargrove didn't consider anything that might be his fault. At 10 o'clock, he left for the office. A driver took him. He sat in the back seat and did not speak to the driver. He did not know the driver's name. 2 worlds, same city, 14 miles apart, and in a few hours they would collide in a ballroom full of crystal and gold and silent witnesses. But the collision didn't start in that ballroom. It started 4 years earlier in a community center in Bridgeport. The Bridgeport Community Center was a gray building with peeling paint and windows that didn't close all the way. In the winter, you could see your breath inside. In the summer, the fans just pushed hot air around. But in the back room, there was a chess club. 8 tables, plastic boards, pieces that were chipped and faded and missing from decades of use. Wesley found the club when he was 14. He had walked past it 100 times. He had seen the old men inside, the ones who sat for hours without speaking, the ones who moved pieces in silence and wrote things down in little notebooks. He thought they were strange. He thought chess was a game for rich kids, for private school kids, for kids who didn't have to worry about whether the lights would stay on this month. But one day it was raining. Hard. He couldn't walk home. He didn't have bus fare. So he stepped inside to wait out the storm. An old man looked up at him from a board where he was playing against himself. The man had deep brown skin and gray hair and eyes that had seen things Wesley couldn't imagine. He was wearing a faded sweatshirt from a university in Nigeria. "You play?" the man asked. Wesley shook his head. The man smiled. "Everyone plays. Some people just don't know it yet. Sit down." Wesley sat. The man's name was Emmanuel Okafor. He had been the Nigerian national chess champion in 1984. He had represented his country in 3 chess Olympiads. He had beaten grandmasters. He had drawn with world champions. And then his visa had expired, and his federation had stopped funding him, and he had ended up in Bridgeport, Connecticut, teaching chess in a community center for almost nothing. He taught Wesley the rules in 20 minutes. Then he beat him in 12 moves. Then he reset the board and beat him in 11 moves. Then he reset the board and beat him in 14 moves. Then he looked at Wesley and said, "You have something. Come back tomorrow." Wesley came back. He came back every day after school for the next 3 years. Emmanuel didn't just teach him openings and end games. He taught him how to think. He taught him that chess was not about memory. It was about pattern recognition. It was about seeing what other people missed. It was about understanding that the most dangerous piece on the board is not the queen. It's the pawn that keeps moving forward until it becomes something greater than itself. "A pawn is not weak," Emmanuel said. "A pawn is potential. Every queen was once a pawn who refused to stay in her place." Wesley wrote that down in a notebook he kept in his backpack. Emmanuel also taught him about the knights. The only pieces that move in an L shape. The only pieces that jump over others. The only pieces that cannot be blocked, only delayed. "A knight moves like no other piece," Emmanuel said. "Unexpected direction. Sudden attack. You want to be a knight, Wesley. Not a rook, not a bishop, a knight. Because when people underestimate the knight checkmates them while they're still looking at the queen." Emmanuel gave Wesley a small black knight pin before he died. Wesley wore it on the strap of his backpack. He never took it off. The second most important person in Wesley's life was his grandfather, Arthur Carter. Arthur was Lorraine's father. He lived in a small house on the south side of Bridgeport. He had worked as a janitor at the same high school for 37 years. He had cleaned floors and bathrooms and chalkboards. He had emptied trash cans and mopped up spills. He had never complained, not once. But Arthur Carter was also the most well-read man Wesley had ever known. He had a library in his basement. Thousands of books, philosophy, history, poetry, mathematics. He had read every single one. He used to tell Wesley, "They can take everything from you, son. Your money, your house, your job. But they cannot take what you put inside your head. That belongs to you forever." Arthur taught Wesley about dignity, about the difference between being quiet and being silent, between being patient and being passive. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," Arthur said. "But when you do prove it, make sure they never forget." Arthur died when Wesley was 15, lung cancer. He had never smoked a day in his life. He had just cleaned floors for 37 years in a building with bad ventilation and asbestos in the walls. On his deathbed, Arthur held Wesley's hand and said, "Don't ever let anyone make you small, Wes. You hear me? You are not small. You are not invisible. You are the smartest person in every room you walk into. Don't let them convince you otherwise." Wesley promised. Then he went home and played chess until 3 in the morning. By the time Wesley was 16, he was better than everyone at the community center. Better than the old men. Better than the college kids who came down from Yale on weekends to play in the park. Better than Emmanuel, who smiled when Wesley finally beat him and said, "Good, now go find stronger opponents." Wesley found them online. He created an account on the biggest chess platform in the world. He didn't use his real name. He used 2 letters, WC. He didn't upload a photo. He didn't fill out a profile. He just played. And he won. He won his first 10 games, then his first 50, then his first 100. He beat players from Russia and India and China and Germany. He beat a 12-year-old prodigy from New York who had been featured in the New York Times. He beat a 60-year-old grandmaster from Ukraine who had been playing since before Wesley's parents were born. His rating climbed. 1800, 1900, 2000, national master level, 2100, 2200. He was in the top 1% of all chess players in America. He was 17 years old. And nobody knew, not his teachers, not his classmates, not his mother's boss. Not a single person in the Hargrove estate had any idea that the quiet kid who did his homework in the kitchen was one of the best chess players in the country. Wesley kept it a secret because he understood something that most people never understand. He understood that power is dangerous when it belongs to the wrong person. He understood that Richard Hargrove would not celebrate his talent. Richard Hargrove would feel threatened by it. Richard Hargrove would wonder why his housekeeper's son was smarter than him. And then Richard Hargrove would find a reason to fire Lorraine. So Wesley played in the dark. He won in silence. He printed out puzzles at the public library and solved them on the bus. He studied endgame theory in the laundry room while the machines rumbled. He practiced visualization techniques in his head during class, playing entire games without a board, without pieces, just memory and concentration. He was patient. He had learned that from Emmanuel and Arthur both. Patience is not passivity. Patience is waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, standing in the ballroom of the Hargrove estate, facing a drunk billionaire who wanted his mother on her knees, Wesley knew this was the right moment. The game began at 9:27 p.m. Richard Hargrove chose white. Of course he did. He wanted the first move. He wanted to attack. He wanted to show everyone in that ballroom that he was in control. He opened with e4, the king's pawn, the most common first move in chess. Aggressive, traditional, safe. Wesley responded with e5, mirroring him, accepting the challenge. Hargrove moved his knight to f3, developing. Textbook. Wesley moved his knight to c6, also textbook. So far, everything was normal. Everything was predictable. The crowd relaxed a little. They didn't understand chess deeply, but they recognized the rhythm of two people following the rules. Then Hargrove played bc4, the Italian game, a solid opening. Named after a country known for art and beauty and appropriately pretending to be better than you actually are. Wesley looked at the board for 5 seconds. Then he played knight f6. The two knights' defense. If you don't play chess, here's what you need to know. The two knights' defense is not passive. It is not polite. It is a direct challenge to white's center. It says, I don't care about your beautiful Italian game. I'm going to attack your pawn immediately and make you prove you know what you're doing. Hargrove's smile twitched. Just barely. He played d3, a quiet move, defensive. He was protecting his pawn instead of continuing to attack. Wesley noticed. In chess, as in life, the first time someone chooses defense over offense, they are telling you something. They are telling you they are uncomfortable. They are telling you they don't see a clear path forward. They are telling you that your presence is making them second-guess themselves. Wesley played h6. A small move, almost invisible to the untrained eye, but Hargrove's face changed, because h6 asks a question, a rude question. It says, I know you want to move your knight here, and I'm not going to let you. Hargrove moved his knight to c3, developing, still following the rules, still pretending everything was fine. Wesley played d6, solid, patient, building a foundation. Hargrove played o0, castling, moving his king to safety. Wesley played bg4, and now the room started to feel different. Because bg4 pins, Hargrove's knight to his queen. That means if Hargrove moves his knight, Wesley can capture the queen. It's a threat, a quiet threat, the kind of threat that doesn't shout but absolutely refuses to be ignored. Hargrove leaned back in his chair. He picked up his champagne glass, drank the rest of it, set it down. He played h3, a direct challenge. He was asking Wesley's bishop a question. Move or be captured? Wesley moved his bishop to h5, not retreating, just repositioning. Hargrove played G4. This was a mistake, a real mistake. He was pushing pawns on the side of the board instead of controlling the center. He was reacting instead of acting. He was playing like someone who wanted to scare his opponent instead of someone who wanted to beat his opponent. Wesley moved his bishop to G6. Quiet, calm, waiting. Hargrove played G5. Another pawn move, another wasted move. He was trying to chase Wesley's knight now, push it away from the center, make it uncomfortable. But Wesley's knight didn't need to stay on F6. He had other plans. He played ND7, retreating. But retreating with purpose. Because from D7 the knight could go to C5, and from C5 it could go to B3, and from B3 it could attack Hargrove's queen. Hargrove didn't see it. He was too busy feeling good about chasing the knight away. He played a 4, a pointless move. A move that said, "I'm bored with this position. I want something dramatic to happen." Wesley gave him something dramatic. He played C6, building a wall, protecting his center, giving his pieces room to breathe. Hargrove played a 5, more pointless pushing. He was moving pawns on the edge of the board like someone who had run out of ideas but was too proud to admit it. Wesley played QC7, bringing his queen into the game. Not attacking, just placing her on a square where she could see everything, where she could wait. Hargrove played R3, and now the chess players watching in the ballroom started to whisper. Because RA3 is not a serious move. It's a move you play when you don't know what else to do. It's a move you play when you're hoping your opponent makes a mistake instead of trusting your own ability to win. Wesley looked at the board for 10 seconds. Then he played B5. A pawn sacrifice. He offered Hargrove a free pawn. Right there. In the open. No tricks. No traps. Just a pawn sitting on B5, waiting to be taken. Hargrove saw it. Of course he saw it. He smiled. "You sure about that, boy?" he said. Wesley didn't answer. Hargrove took the pawn, captured it with his A5 pawn, grabbed the piece off the board like he was picking fruit from a low branch. And that's when Grandmaster Elena Voss, who was standing near the back of the ballroom with a glass of wine she had barely touched, lowered her glass and took a step forward. Elena Voss was not supposed to be at the Hargrove Invitational. She had been invited as a courtesy because she lived in the area and her husband did business with Hargrove's company. She was a grandmaster, one of only 40 women in history to earn that title. She had beaten world champions. She had written books on chess strategy that were required reading in Moscow and Beijing and New York. She knew what she was looking at. And what she was looking at was not a teenager making a mistake. What she was looking at was a positional sacrifice. The kind of sacrifice that Bobby Fischer used to play. The kind of sacrifice that doesn't win material but wins something more important. Space. Time. Initiative. By taking that pawn on B5, Hargrove had opened the A file. He had created a weakness on his own queen side. He had given Wesley a target, and Wesley had already moved his pieces to attack that target. His queen was on C7. His knight was on D7, ready to jump to C5. His bishop was on G6, controlling the long diagonal. His rook was still on A8, but the A file was now open. Completely open, like a highway straight to Hargrove's king. Wesley played BB7, developing his last piece, bringing his bishop to the long diagonal, pointing it directly at Hargrove's castled king. Hargrove played Ra1, retreating, pulling his rook back to safety, admitting without saying a word that his pawn advance had been a mistake. Wesley played NC5. His knight arrived on C5. From here, it could go to B3 or D3 or a 4. It could cause chaos. It could create threats that Hargrove could not ignore. Hargrove played ND2, trying to simplify, trying to trade pieces, trying to reduce the complexity of the position because he was drowning and he knew it. Wesley played NCD3. He refused the trade. He moved his knight deeper into enemy territory. The knight on D3 was a monster. It attacked the rook on A1. It attacked the bishop on C1. It controlled the B2 square. It was everything. Hargrove played knight B3, trying to chase the knight away, trying to do something, anything. Wesley played NXB2. He took a pawn, a small gain, but the real gain was psychological, because now Hargrove knew. Now everyone in the ballroom knew. Wesley was not defending. Wesley was attacking. Wesley was hunting. Hargrove played RX4, trying to create counterplay, trying to win back material, trying to look like he was still in control. Wesley played knight takes D3. He traded his monster knight for Hargrove's bishop. A fair trade, but the position was not fair anymore. Wesley had two pieces bearing down on Hargrove's king. His rook on A8 was ready to come to the A file. His bishop on B7 was aiming at the king like a sniper. Hargrove played QXD3, capturing Wesley's knight, winning back the material, but losing the battle, because now his queen was exposed. Now his king was alone. Wesley played rook takes A4, capturing Hargrove's rook, equalizing material, but not equalizing the position, because Wesley's remaining rook was still on A8, ready to come to A1. His queen was still on C7, watching everything. His bishop was still on B7, pointing at the king. Hargrove played queen D2, retreating, hiding his queen, trying to survive. Wesley played rook A1, and now the room was completely silent, because the rook on A1 was a hammer. It was pointed directly at Hargrove's king. It was one move away from checkmate, one move away from ending the game. Hargrove looked at the board. His face was red. His hands were shaking. He picked up his champagne glass. It was empty. He set it down. He had one move, one desperate move to avoid immediate checkmate. He played KH1, moving his king to the corner, buying time, begging for mercy. Wesley looked at the board for 3 seconds. Then he played queen takes H2, checkmate. The queen delivered the final blow. The king had nowhere to run. The rook on A1 controlled the first rank. The bishop on B7 controlled the long diagonal. The queen on H2 was defended by nothing except the absolute certainty that the game was over. Richard Hargrove stared at the board. The ballroom was dead silent. 120 people, crystal chandeliers, a $200,000 chessboard, and nobody said a word. Hargrove looked up at Wesley. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "That's not possible," he whispered. Wesley didn't say anything. "You cheated," Hargrove said louder. "You had to have cheated. There's no way. I've been playing for 30 years. Wesley still didn't say anything. Hargrove stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. The sound was loud in the silence. "Someone help him," Hargrove said, looking around the room. "Someone tell me how he did that. That wasn't fair. That wasn't legal." And then Elena Voss stepped forward. She walked through the crowd. People parted for her without even realizing they were doing it. She stopped next to the board, looked at the position, looked at Hargrove, looked at Wesley. "That was a Morphy-style sacrifice," she said quietly. "The pawn on B5, the open a file, the knight on D3. I haven't seen anyone play that line since the 1990s. Hargrove looked at her. "Elena, tell them. Tell them he cheated." She shook her head. "He didn't cheat. He outplayed you. Move 32. When you played Raw 3, that's when you lost. Everything after that was just him showing off." The crowd gasped. Hargrove's face went pale, then red, then pale again. "I don't believe this," he said. "Who even is this kid?" Elena Voss looked at Wesley, at the black night pin on his backpack, at the quiet confidence in his eyes. And then she did something that changed everything. She pulled out her phone, opened the chess platform, typed in 2 letters, WC. The screen loaded. She read the stats out loud without meaning to, without realizing how loud her voice was in the silent ballroom. 2,280 rating, 147 game winning streak, undefeated in 4 years. She looked up. This kid is a national master. He's one of the best players in the country. The room erupted, not cheering, not clapping, a different kind of eruption, a wave of whispers and gasps and people turning to each other with wide eyes. The kind of noise you make when you realize you've been standing next to something extraordinary, and you didn't even know it. David Stein, the real estate CEO who had lost to Hargrove on purpose earlier that night, stepped forward. He looked at Wesley. Then he looked at Hargrove. "Richard," Stein said quietly, "you just lost $1 million to a housekeeper's son." Hargrove spun on him. "Shut up, David." "You made him add the condition," Stein continued. "The check goes to his mother. You said that in front of everyone." Hargrove's hands were shaking now. His face was wet with sweat. He looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on a trap door and someone had already pulled the lever. "I'm not writing that check," Hargrove said. The room went quiet again. Wesley spoke for the first time since the game ended. His voice was calm, quiet, but everyone heard it. "You gave your word in front of 120 people. Hargrove laughed, a broken laugh, a laugh that sounded like glass breaking. "My word? You want my word? You're nothing. You're a servant's kid who got lucky in a game. Do you know how many lawsuits I can file before breakfast? Do you know how many lawyers I have on retainer?" Wesley didn't flinch. He just stood there, waiting. And then Lorraine Carter walked out of the service hallway. She had been watching from the shadows, watching her son play the most important game of his life, watching him stay calm, stay focused, stay dignified, watching him become the man his grandfather knew he would become. She walked into the center of the ballroom, past the politicians and the celebrities and the people who had never looked her in the eye. She stopped next to her son. "Richard," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it was steady. It was the voice of a woman who had scrubbed floors for 11 years and never complained. The voice of a woman who had raised a genius on instant coffee and oatmeal. Hargrove looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in 11 years. "Write the check," Lorraine said. Hargrove opened his mouth, closed it, looked around the room, looked for someone to save him, someone to laugh, someone to change the subject. No one did, because the people in that room finally understood what was happening. They finally understood that they had been watching a slow-motion car crash for 32 moves. They finally understood that Richard Hargrove III had just been beaten by an 18-year-old in front of everyone who mattered to him. And they finally understood that there was no way out, no excuse, no escape. Hargrove pulled out his checkbook. His hands were shaking so badly he had to try 3 times to get the pen to work. He wrote the numbers. $1 million. He wrote the name. Lorraine Carter. He tore the check out of the book and held it out. Lorraine didn't take it right away. She looked at her son. Wesley nodded. She took the check, and then she did something that no one in that ballroom ever forgot. She folded it in half, put it in her pocket, and said, "Thank you, Richard. The floors in the East Wing still need mopping. I'll get to them in the morning." She turned around. Wesley turned with her, and they walked out of the ballroom together, past the crystal chandeliers, past the $200,000 chessboard, past the 120 people who would tell this story for the rest of their lives. They walked through the service hallway, through the kitchen, out the back door, into the cold Connecticut night. The door closed behind them, and Richard Hargrove III stood alone in his ballroom, surrounded by his powerful friends, holding an empty checkbook, trying to remember who he was before he lost everything that mattered in 32 moves. Here's what happened after. Lorraine Carter cashed the check the next morning. She paid off the back rent. She fixed the heating in the apartment. She bought a new refrigerator. She put the rest into a savings account for Wesley's college tuition. Wesley kept playing chess. He finally stopped hiding. His real name appeared on the platform. His rating climbed to 2,300, then 2,400. He earned his Grandmaster title at 21, the youngest black Grandmaster in American history. Richard Hargrove III never recovered. Not financially. He still had money. He always would. But something else broke that night. Something that money couldn't fix. His reputation, his confidence, the illusion that he was better than other people just because he was born into the right family. David Stein stopped letting him win at chess. So did everyone else. Hargrove lost 27 games in a row over the next year. He stopped playing eventually. He stopped hosting the Invitational. He stopped being invited to things. The people in that ballroom never forgot the night they watched a housekeeper's son destroy a billionaire on his own chessboard. They told the story at dinner parties, at business meetings, at family gatherings. They told it to anyone who would listen, and every time they told it, they added the same ending. The kid didn't even celebrate. He just put the check in his pocket and walked out with his mother. Like he knew the whole time. Like he was never worried. Not once. Here's what this story is really about. It's not about chess. Chess is just the game they happen to be playing. This story is about the difference between inherited power and earned power. Between people who are given everything and people who build themselves from nothing. Between the ones who talk and the ones who do. Richard Hargrove thought he was unbeatable because no one had ever challenged him. But that's not strength. That's just a life lived in a room full of people who are afraid to tell you the truth. Wesley Carter was unbeatable because he had earned it, because he had studied and practiced and sacrificed and fought, because he had been knocked down and gotten back up, because he had learned from a Nigerian champion who cleaned floors and a grandfather who read books and a mother who never stopped working. The people who really win in this world are not the ones who shout the loudest or spend the most money or inherit the biggest houses. The people who really win are the ones who stay quiet when everyone expects them to break, who keep working when no one is watching, who wait for the right moment and then move with absolute certainty. That's what Wesley did. He waited 4 years, 147 games. Not a single loss. And when the moment came, he didn't hesitate. He didn't gloat. He didn't humiliate his opponent, even though his opponent deserved it. He just played, moved, won, walked away. Because that's what dignity looks like. It doesn't need to celebrate. It doesn't need to explain itself. It just exists. Quiet, unshakable, unforgettable. So here's the question for you. Who are you underestimating right now? Who is sitting in the corner of your office or your classroom or your life, quiet and unnoticed, building something you can't see? Who is waiting for their moment? And when that moment comes, will you be like Richard Hargrove, blind and arrogant and broken by the weight of your own assumptions? Or will you be like Wesley, patient, prepared, ready? Because the truth is, the person you think is beneath you might just be the person who checkmates you while you're still looking at the queen. Subscribe if you want to see more stories about people who refuse to stay in their place. And remember the Black Knight. Unexpected direction. Sudden attack. You never see it coming until it's already over.